You ladies and gentlemen of the press have been less than honest reporting to the American people what's going on in this country.
It's the baby's out.
We're dealing with Hitler Revisited.
This is the Scott Horton Show. Libertarian foreign policy. Mostly.
When the president does it, that means that it is not illegal.
We're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years.
They don't know what the they're doing.
Negotiate now. End this war.
And now, here's your host, Scott Horton.
All right, you guys, introducing Jason Jones again. He runs an NGO called the Vulnerable People's Project, and he's got a great Substack, The Jason Jones Show, where also you can see his show and his writings, and that is thejasonjonesshow.substack.com. And happy to talk to you again. How are you? Oh no, all of a sudden I can't hear you anymore.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry about that. It's great to see you, Scott.
Yeah, you too. How are you? And are you still in Palestine, or you came back now?
No, I left the promised land and I returned to the Holy Land of Texas.
There you go, where you rightfully belong. All right, so you run this NGO, but you're not CIA or NED or anything like that. You're like a real human out here in the world somehow, but you...
Yeah, unfortunately. Unfortunately, I think I'm a real human.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
No, I appreciate that.
I don't have a 401k. I think if I were in CIA, I would have a 401k, which I really wish I had.
Yeah, you're probably going to need one at some point.
Best. I'm sure they have better life insurance. I mean, health insurance than I do. But
all right. Well, listen, I think all people should be, if they're not already, rightfully suspicious of any kind of so-called NGO. I guess the difference between a nonprofit like the Libertarian Institute and an NGO is, I think it's the Bangladeshis I heard coin the phrase, it's a next to government organization rather than a non-governmental organization. And that, so if you're taking government money, then you're like doing their work or something. But I don't know if you take government money at all. I don't know if it's really to call your group an NGO or if it's just a nonprofit charity.
We're a Catholic nonprofit, and from the child in the womb to the child in Gaza, all of our work animates out of Catholic social teaching. I founded the organization in 2002, trying to harness pro-life and conservative sentiment to stop the enthusiasm to topple Saddam Hussein and invade Iraq. I like everything I try, I failed at that. We did not stop the invasion of Iraq. I thought I had a genius plan.
That's not all on you, bro. We, a lot of us failed at that at the same time.
Yeah. So, but that's how the organization was founded, and then we grew from there. I've never taken government money.
No government,
and not out of any moral reasons. I just never thought of it. But then when Trump, in the first Trump presidency, actually State Department and USAID invited me in, and they asked me to submit a very large grant proposal for my work, and I thought about it, and at the end of the day I just didn't do it. And I'm in retrospect, I'm very glad that we never, but I just knew that when you take money from the government, you work for the government, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Our average donor is $120 a year. What's great about that is, when you work for major donors, when you're funded by a few handful of major donors, you work for them, and they're risk averse oftentimes. So I'm grateful that we're a small NGO and we're funded by small donors.
Very cool. All right. The Vulnerable People Project, and that is vulnerablepeopleproject.com. That's the site there. And you just got back from the West Bank, right? Spent Christmas in Bethlehem. I got that right?
I did, actually. I spent Christmas in Bethlehem, and we also went to, of course, we started in Jordan, where I met with our logistics partners who we're working with to deliver aid into not only the last Christian communities in Gaza, there are 2 Christian communities left, but also to the orphan. We're supporting some doctors serving orphans. So I went to meet with our logistics partner prior to Christmas. Then I went to Jerusalem. And from Jerusalem, we went to the West Bank. We were all over. We'll be releasing it in the coming weeks. I interviewed the mayor of Ramallah, the mayor of Bethlehem, and also pastors and priests from different ecclesial communities, the Orthodox, the Armenian, the Anglican, the Lutheran, trying to get a varied perspective on what's happening there.
Well, do tell then.
Yeah, well, let me tell you, first of all, we had a major coup. Like Steve Bannon invited us to do a 2-hour live special from Bethlehem where I got to lay out the propaganda that it's not their Muslim neighbors that are responsible for the ethnic cleansing of Christians in the West Bank. It's the state of Israel, and it's their ever-expanding illegal settlements. And so to be able to say that on Christmas Eve on Bannon's Little Room, I think was a big coup. And now we see the response from Netanyahu and his allies saying that Israel is going to be our ally in defeating the enemies of Christians around the world, which it's interesting because, I mean, you can look at the greatest sources of persecution are our allies, India, Turkey, and Israel, and our trading partner, China. So rather than, it's not, you know, we don't have to go on all these military adventures around the world. Why don't we just ask our allies, Turkey, Israel, and India, to stop fomenting the persecution and ethnic cleansing of Christian communities? It was Israel that armed Azerbaijan 2 years ago, and we saw an ancient Armenian community in Artsakh totally ethnically cleansed. There are new settlements being approved every day surrounding the Christian communities in the West Bank. You have Shepherd's Field now being almost completely will be confiscated for a new settlement, this ancient Christian site encircling the Christian communities in Bethlehem and Betzahur. And Tebe, I was in Tebe less than a week ago, and I met with the Latin Rite priest. That's the Catholic priest. I'm Catholic, Latin Rite. We met with him, and it was really spooky to see this small Christian community surrounded by violent settlers. And then to see Benjamin Netanyahu this weekend go on a terror on Acts and his commitment to protect ancient Christian communities. It's absolutely absurd. They could simply begin by letting us bring in aid to the churches in Gaza, or letting the children with cancer in Gaza, the Christian children out, all the children out to get the treatment they need. But they refused Cardinal Pizzabala's request. Israel has refused the request of the Patriarch and Pope Leo to allow those Catholic and Orthodox children with cancer to leave to receive their treatment. And yet Netanyahu's on X telling us how he's going to protect Christians. It's unbelievable. They supported, you know, you're all of our, not to make you blush, but all of us watching and me being here with you, you're a hero of ours because you spoke out against Iraq and Syria. You know, Netanyahu was a key cheerleader for us shattering the secular equilibrium in Iraq that Saddam Hussein and Assad guaranteed. Not that we love those thugs, but there was a secular equilibrium and the Christian communities were protected. We shattered the secular equilibrium. Netanyahu cheered us on all along the way. And we see now these ancient Christian communities being destroyed. And the same people that caused this catastrophe are promising to protect the Christians. I doubt that.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I guess it's been a little while since I looked at like what's the latest news, but I know back then that the Chaldean community in Iraq was essentially obliterated. They just scattered to the winds wherever they were. They're living in refugee camps in Syria when the whole thing went to hell, you know, later on. And then I know there are quite a few major different sects of Christians in Syria that, you know, certainly were heavily persecuted during, you know, their subjugation under ISIS during the dirty war in the Obama years when ISIS and or Al-Qaeda, Nusra, or Jaish al-Islam or Arar al-Sham and those groups ruled Christian communities. And then I know there's been, you know, massacres against them in the last year since America and Israel and Turkey helped Al-Qaeda finally sack Damascus at the end of November and beginning of December of 24 there. And so, yeah, add them up. And, you know, I just saw this thing, Jason, where, and this is understandable, right? Where if Americans who don't know anything about it just had to guess, they would think that in the Middle East, the Christians are on Israel's side and Israel is on their side versus the Muslim enemy. Everybody knows that, right? And they don't understand that the Christians there are Arabs and are persecuted along with their Palestinian Muslim neighbors. And it's the Israelis who are their persecutors, not just by proxy, like we're talking about helping monger wars in Iraq and Syria that led to these terrible consequences, or allying with Erdogan and this kind of thing. But explicitly bombing them to death, it's the Israelis. And I think people really are surprised. You see this kind of thing on Twitter, where all Muslims will only kill anyone who refuses to convert. That's how Islam is spread. And so it's impossible, Jason, that there be such a thing as Palestinian Christians, because the Palestinian Muslims would have killed or converted them all by now, ipso facto, dude. And then if they did exist at all, it would be the Israeli Jews who protect them because they're our greatest allies. And that's probably why, right?
Well, they say, they say the line is that, Israel is the only country in the Middle East where Christians feel safe. Well, that's absolutely not true. In fact, you can go on YouTube and watch the Christian celebrations in Jordan. I was in Jordan for Christmas, before Christmas, leading up to Christmas. Not that there aren't enthusiasms of violence, not that there aren't Islamist extremism, but the idea that the only place in the Middle East where Christians are safe is Israel is absurd. And in fact, the only place in the Middle East I don't feel safe is Israel, to be honest. When I go, I just feel strange, and I can't wait to get to the West Bank. Every time I go, I just try to stay in East Jerusalem, and then I go to the West Bank. I feel very at home at the West Bank. I have to say, I am charmed by the Israeli people. I love the Israeli people. I especially love Haifa, and I love going there and being around my Israeli friends, but it's just an uncomfortable place to be as a Christian. And as soon as I cross over into the West Bank, I feel comfortable. I can breathe easy. In fact, when you cross over on your Waze or your map, whatever app you use, it'll say danger, danger, entering danger zone, and it turns red, as if. And then you'll meet a lot of these American Christians who go to Bethlehem on these sort of package tours to inculcate support for the state of Israel, and they really will share with you how daring and brave they were to enter into Bethlehem, surrounded by Islamists, to go to the Church of the Nativity. And of course, I go to Bethlehem for weeks at a time, and you just feel so at home. And I just brought 2 of my children with me for Christmas. I wouldn't bring my children anywhere I didn't think they were safe. Now, when I was nervous, was when we went to Teba, and I was documenting settler violence. I was worried because, there's one village in the West Bank that is predominantly American, Palestinian Americans. You'll have guys who are lawyers. There's one guy I know is a lawyer in Anaheim, and then he's a farmer back in this village. But even though the majority of the village has blue passports, these settlers are relentless in beating them up, and they just beat up a journalist, an American journalist there. So I was nervous entering Teba with my sons. Because they're big, tough teenagers who I don't think would take being, they're not going to not retaliate. So I just thought things could escalate fast. But fortunately it was okay, but it was creepy. It was really creepy. But look, Israel has not only bombed churches in Gaza, and settlers don't only threaten, and they put graffiti there. For example, in Jerusalem, "Death to Christians" was spray painted on a church recently. So there have been hundreds of attacks in the past 12 months on Christians by Zionists in Jerusalem alone in the past 12 months. So, and all these new settlements have been approved, but Israel's bombed churches in Syria, in Jordan. I'm sorry, not in Jordan, Syria and Lebanon, and of course in Gaza. And there have been attacks on churches in the West Bank. So Netanyahu can just simply, if he wants to protect Christians, he should protect the Christians in Gaza and the West Bank and stop bombing churches in Lebanon.
Yeah. Expanddesigns.com. That's my friend Harley Abbott's company. And he is the webmaster for the Scott Horton Show, as well as the Libertarian Institute. He is the guy that redesigned the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity website. He's done a lot of great work for other friends of mine. And unlike a lot of webmasters and web developers and different guys that I have worked with over the years, the thing is about Harley Abbott and his team is they do what they say they're going to do when they say they're going to do it, and are just extremely reliable and extremely knowledgeable. And 100% vouch for the great Harley Abbott over there. You got a website, you need it fixed up, you need a new one, you're setting up a business, working on any kind of online project like that, check out expanddesigns.com. So, well, I don't know as much about Lebanon, but, please elaborate about that. But can you talk about the churches in Gaza? Because I know some of these were ancient churches that are completely destroyed, right?
Yeah, well, on October 9th, 2024, St. George Melkite Catholic Church was destroyed by Israel in Lebanon. You have these two communities, St. Porphyrius, which is Orthodox, and Holy Family Catholic Church. St. Porphyrius is a church that I believe was planted by St. James, the brother of Jesus. And so you have, and the church goes back to the 3rd or 4th century that it's been there. But even in the Church of the Nativity, there are bullet holes from when the IDF attacked the church 2 decades ago. So, and the Christians in the West Bank are every Christian hospital, every Christian school, and every church has been bombed at least once. All of the Christian homes have been destroyed. So I would say to Netanyahu, you're going to protect Christians? All right, what about those 2 Christian women, those 2 Catholic women that were assassinated by a sniper in December of 2021 when they were walking out of the church to use the restroom? And an IDF sniper shot both of them, and Israel acknowledges this after trying to deny it. Why aren't we seeing soldiers prosecuted for war crimes? What about the commanders that ordered the bombing of the church, or just this past summer when a tank took aim at the crucifix above the church, the cross above the church, killing several people and wounding the parish priest himself? So, the war on Christianity by the state of Israel marches on, and their great ally, India. We're seeing state-sponsored and state-supported violence across India against Christian communities. In one state alone last year, over 300 churches were destroyed. If President Trump and Netanyahu want to go on a campaign to protect Christians, let's start with India and Israel.
Yeah, well, they won't be doing that. It's just public relations. But, there's so many important things to go over here, but just on the overall kind of concept of just who's occupying who over there, the American people, I feel like, are always just kept so much in the dark about this. And as soon as they do see, here's the map, okay, and here's the way it is, then they very quickly side with the Palestinians because they clearly are the ones being victimized by the aggressor. And that doesn't make them all perfect people or whatever, and certainly not their armed Islamist militias like Hamas, who do commit terrorist acts against civilians and all the rest of that, of course. But I mean, no question, really, of who's picking this fight, who's occupying who's bombing who. And I have found over the years that when I explain to people that, well, one, just it's the Israelis occupying the Palestinians, not the other way around, but that also the Christians are lumped in as the victims with the Muslims, not on the Israeli side, but on the Palestinian side. That's who's being displaced, are the Palestinian Christians stuff. And it's really eye-opening for people because they've been conditioned, I guess, through media and whatever propaganda that, like, if it's just Muslims, then screw them. But what if they're Arabs, but they're Christians? I mean, that sounds like you got at least 3/5 humanity going on there, or something worth considering, right? That, like, they're kind of like you, right? Like, you got to stop and think about that for a minute, right? That they're not.
Scott, I'm going to be honest. I feel guilty. My assistant is Muslim, and I think sometimes she feels uncomfortable because I'm always on these media talking about they're killing Christians, or starving Christians, or killing Christian men and women and children. But obviously, I'm doing that in a desperate attempt to humanize the victims of genocide.
And by the way, for the computer god algorithm censors, I'm obviously using the G word there facetiously, like the way that the American military did in Vietnam to justify obliterating people. I wasn't.
What's the G word? I did.
I said they're not just gooks. If they're Christians, then they're a little bit like us. They're not just such others that somehow it's okay to just purely napalm all of them for some reason,
No, yeah, you're right. And I forgive you for using that word. I use that word with my wife, who's Chinese. Sometimes I wake up and I yell "gook in the wire" and laugh, and she doesn't think it's funny at all. And I think it's funny. So,
Jesus.
But I think
well,
I did.
This one ain't getting monetized. Go ahead.
No, we can edit that out. I apologize, guys.
No. I already blew it anyway.
I'm allowed to say it because my children are that.
And look, context is everything, man. I wasn't being racist against Asian folk.
No, what
I
you
was
were saying
talking
is
about how racist people against Asian folk, how that same kind of idea translates around to other victims is all, of course, is what.
No, we made a movie. I was involved in the making of a movie called Little Boy, starring Kevin James. And it's just an amazing film on World War II, beautiful film. But we wanted to highlight anti-Japanese prejudice in the film, and so we used a word that was used at the time, and our film was totally censored because we used the language of the era to show racism. But I get your point. It's sad.
I saw a guy, a real historian from the University of History downtown somewhere or whatever, on YouTube doing a presentation about how Nazi Germany suppressed the book All Quiet on the Western Front. And they censored it. And this guy, when I saw his thing, he goes, this is the 6th time I've tried to do this video. YouTube keeps taking it down. And the whole time he had to talk about the bad mustache man that took over Germany with the help of the Yahtzee party and all these things. Because if he doesn't say that, he has to say some people who happen to have been of Jewish extraction. He can't just say Hitler killed the Jews of Germany, because the phrase alone, no matter the context, you cannot use these words on YouTube. And so here's a real historian, professor from the university, the publicly funded one, who is censored by YouTube from doing any kind of reasonable presentation about German Nazi censorship of a book back then, right? And just because the words are there, not even based on the slightest pretension that the algorithm thinks that you're promoting the Nazi party and their point of view right now or anything like that.
And you know what's sad about that, Scott? The most effective way to undermine virulent, hateful, and bigoted ideologies is through ridicule. Right. But if we're not allowed to address them through humor, through satire, through sarcasm, and through ridicule, they become really almost, they can become completely inoculated to remedy. Ridicule is the best medicine sometimes for virulent ideologies. And, one of my great fears is there is most definitely right now a very sophisticated, well-funded campaign to foment anti-Arab and anti-Muslim prejudice simply to excuse the genocide in Gaza, period. And so all of a sudden, people discovered Nigeria for 2 weeks last month, and all we heard about was Nigeria. Now, my organization is in Nigeria. Not only do we guard the vulnerable Christian communities, we provide guards for the last Jewish community, by the way, something we did after October 7th. And so we were so excited to see that people were worried about Islamist violence against minority communities in Nigeria. But of course, it lasted 2 weeks. It was like,
and it resulted in airstrikes that killed innocent people.
Yeah, so exactly. And now we have Netanyahu pledging to defend Christian communities. Well, our democracy in Iraq gave us the total ethnic cleansing of the Assyrians and Chaldeans practically from Iraq that survived hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years of Ottoman rule. But by the end of the first Bush's second term, before Obama became president, most of the Christians had been ethnically cleansed. And then we saw ISIS eviscerate the Yazidi people. So God forbid, what I don't get about a lot of these quote unquote hawks, these chicken hawks, is, when Ronald Reagan said, what did he say? The scariest words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. I'm from the federal. Yeah, it's also scary when we say that to vulnerable minority communities around the world. Like the last thing I would want to hear if I'm a vulnerable ethnic or religious community on earth is I'm from the United States government and we're here to help. Like, no, thank you. Bye, please leave.
That's what Harry Brown said. He goes, look, war is simply the biggest big government program of all. There's just the post office with M16s. How do you figure they're going to do their job well? Their job is not even to do their job well. Their job is to just have jabs to do. I mean, their whole thing is about spreading and creating chaos. There's American GIs that coined the term.
No, I remember
ice cream cone.
I think their job is to expend ammunition so more can be purchased.
Yeah.
You know, when I was in the
absolutely.
Army, I was a scout, and we were for a light infantry unit, and we would also have to be, even though we were light infantry in 25th ID Hawaii, we had to use AT4s, the anti-tank weapon we were being qualified in. And they were telling us how much these cost, you know, like $50,000 a piece. And we'd go through like 15 of them a day at the range. And I'd say, can I just not do 3 of them and you just give me 75,000 and we'll split the difference, you know? But that was my job. I thought I was lucky because I was getting to, you know, spend $1 million in ammunition in a day, while, you know, drinking sweet tea in the sun. And no, that was not why. You know, but people were making a lot of money, just not me.
Yeah. No, there's testimony. It's in the documentary American Holocaust, narrated by Martin Sheen about Vietnam, where they show testimony in front of Congress where the guy says that the bombs would pile up on the tarmac. They would keep getting delivered. And so he had to keep delivering them, dropping them on Laos. And they asked him, like, why are you bombing Laos? And he's going, because the bombs are piling up on the tarmac. I got to get rid of them. I got this inventory. So
Everything must go. It's the end of the
That's
year.
right. I'm trying to get rid of these bombs, guys. Let's do this. And then so the people of Laos are just not even extras in a commercial here, right? They just don't even count at all.
Well,
Anyway,
you know,
we're off topic a bit.
and
Go
what
ahead.
are the decades of cost? You know, Karl Popper said it's 5 generations for a society to recover from a war. And we've had endless wars. You know, last year,
Well, and there's still thousands killed a year from the undetonated cluster bomb units in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Still thousands.
and how many
every year.
soldiers still are wrestling with, you know, I just watched Song Sung Blue last night on a veteran who was he was with his wife. They did, I forget, Neil Diamond. It's a band from Wisconsin, a cover band, a Neil Diamond cover band of 70s or 80s and 90s. But it was about this veteran, and it touched on his PTSD. But you know, Israel last year, we saw the highest number of suicides on record of IDF soldiers. You know, this is.
Let me make a correction real quick. I think I misspoke when I said that. I think it's hundreds per year in Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia, and a total of, I think it was 6,000 something or 8,000 something over 20 years, something like that. I'm sorry. I just didn't want to overstate numbers, man. I should, but still horrible. Little kids and old people, or, you know, farmers and whoever, getting their limbs and worse blown off over bombs that literally LBJ and
What
Nixon
you're
dropped.
saying is every year or two, as many children in Laos die from our unexploded ordnance as died in the October 7th attack. And we're looking at, you know, 35 years, 45 years later. And yeah, this is the cost of war, and it lasts generations. And again, this is why I just greatly appreciate antiwar.com, your work and your audience, because I just don't understand how we're not winning at this point. I just don't understand.
We just don't have the money, so we're not the power faction. But in terms of the narrative, we absolutely are. I mean, Israel's name is mud. There's no getting over the people they killed, and just. I remember people got mad at me. I tweeted a picture about a year and a half ago or something of just 2 dead boys laying in the street that Israel had killed. And I said, Israel is just finished. They are never getting over this public relations disaster. And people got really mad at me reading into it that what I was saying was that that's all that's happening here, is that it's a public relations disaster. And that's not what I was saying.
Can't win with people. Yeah, right.
Yeah, but what I was saying was, this truth can't be fixed by a bunch of Hasbara shoveling shit down everybody's throat and trying to tell them, oh, we're your greatest ally and the most moral army and all that. Oh, yeah, I seen too many pictures of dead kids with my own eyes. And there ain't no amount of propaganda, no amount of public relations, no matter how much you spend and how much you censor, can take that back. And if you listen to them, talking, oh, it's the rise of anti-Semitism. Oh, it's the rise of anti-Jewish terrorism. And then you'll have entire polemics without any mention of the last 2 years of slaughter. Like we're all that stupid. Like we all think that that's what happened, is in the last 2 years, people just started hating Jews a lot. No, it was Israel claiming to be all Jews while slaughtering people, and while their lobbies worked overtime to censor their righteous critics. for doing so in the Western countries. I mean, I don't know if you saw the viral clip on Twitter today. Is an Israeli billionaire in America demanding we curtail, literally his words, the First Amendment, because we can't allow criticism of Israel in the United States of America anymore. And I'm just saying, like, hey, man, like, sound advice to that guy. He should shut the hell up, because he is turning Americans against that crappy, worthless little country. They don't even have the oil. They do nothing for us, nothing, except not nuke us.
No.
And blackmail our senators.
Yeah, and they slaughter Christians. They foment the slaughter of Christians. And now that, and so this is the latest, and I think it's the last, it's the battle of the bulge right now. And that's why I'm glad I'm on your show right now, because this is their last tactic. They want to foment anti-Arab and anti-Muslim hatred. And they want to make you so afraid of Arabs and Muslims that you support killing people all over the world, no questions asked, by the state of Israel, that you turn a blind eye to the ethnic cleansing in Gaza, which no one can deny that's what it is. You can we can debate whether or not it's a genocide, and the war on the West Bank. But this is the last campaign, and we as conservatives must not allow ourselves to be lured by this bait. They're they're using bigotry and hatred. It's just you look at guys like Dinesh D'Souza. Which Dinesh, you're Indian. I would like to hear Dinesh speak out against the rising Hindu violence against Christians in India. I'd like Vivek to talk about this as well. JD Vance, it'd be nice if you talked about this as well. We're seeing the rise of Hindu nationalist extremism, state-sponsored anti-conversion laws all across India. Why? To target Christians who are proselytizing and sharing their faith in India. But we have Israel, this, if you saw Netanyahu, some evangelical publicist had his X account all weekend long and was just going on an endless, just rants about how committed he is to protecting Christians.
Oh, I didn't see that.
How about this? Stop the settlements in the West Bank, and then we'll know you're serious. How about this? Let Christian children with cancer out of Gaza to receive their treatment, and let food and medicine in. How about that? When we see that, maybe we'll stop and listen and think you're serious. But I don't think you're serious. I don't think Ambassador Mike Huckabee is serious about protecting those Christian communities, even though he himself said that the attacks on Christians in the West Bank were terrorism committed by terrorists and acts of terror last year. In a moment of sanity and clarity, Huckabee expressed the truth. So that's why I'm glad to be on your show, because we cannot let them foment bigotry. And by the way, it's on both sides, right? There are those opportunists and grifters, who are looking at the genocide in Gaza and they're using it to foment Jew hatred. That does exist. But I think the bigger problem, the most obviously bigger problem, is fomenting anti-Arab and anti-Muslim hatred. So much so that a prominent Christian conservative leader said to me that he wanted to turn all of Gaza into pink mist. And I said, well, there are a lot of women, children, and Christians there. He said, kill them all, let God sort them out, which I thought was interesting, because that expression, I believe, comes from the Crusaders when they entered the Holy Land and they couldn't tell the difference between Christians, Jews, and Muslims. And they were ordered to kill them all and let God sort them out. And so to hear a Christian conservative man who's never done more than 5 push-ups in a row in his life, never served his country in the military, never missed a meal, never has known fear or discomfort, can just sit there and so easily say, kill 2 million people. But that's because he's afraid. He's a coward. And he's so afraid of Palestinians, which is absurd. It's when you go there and you get to know the people. I just wish, like you said, if you go to the West Bank, picture COVID policy times 100 your entire life.
Yeah. Hey, you guys, big news. I have just added part 1 of the new Cold War, my second course at the Scott Horton Academy of Foreign Policy and Freedom. So check it out, scotthortonacademy.com. Got my terror war course. You got the great Jim Bovard on the domestic police state, mostly COVID and Waco and drug wars and TSA and so much good stuff. Ramsey Baroud on Israel-Palestine. Bill Bupert on America losing war after war since World War II. Adam Francisco on debunking Christian Zionism. Well, and really the whole history of Christianity and Judaism and, or at least since Christianity and the modern state of Israel and all of that. And now we have part 1 of my Cold War course for you, the new Cold War course based on my book, Provoked, of course. So check it out. It's been a huge success already. Everybody loves it, getting nothing but positive feedback, and really happy that everybody's getting such a good kick out of it. So if you haven't signed up yet, now's your chance. We got annual as well as lifetime subscriptions there, and you get a free copy of enough already if you sign up for a lifetime subscription, asterisk in the US only. And thanks very much. See you over there, ScottHortonAcademy.com.
All right. So, and look, as far as the Muslim thing, there are honest and decent questions about how much Muslim immigration can you have in the United States, especially when you're talking mass migration, when historically most Muslims in America are not Arabs, they're Asian, and most American Arabs are Christians, not Muslims. And so all these things get conflated, in people's mind. But essentially, we've had upper class people from Southwest Asia coming here mostly. And so we have not had a lot of social problems from having Muslims in most parts of the United States. If Minneapolis and Dearborn and things, if people want to, bring up stuff like that, where you have majority Muslim areas and mores are changing and things, whatever. There are legitimate arguments there about mass migration and that kind of thing. But overall, we have a very small, 3% of the population of the United States are Muslims, and they don't commit terrorist attacks. Like 90% of them have been stings set up by the FBI in the first place. There's been very few American Muslims have done any kind of lone wolf stuff, although there are exceptions to that. There have been some examples of that, but that's not the question. What we're talking about here, and in fact, if you want to talk about terrorism in the United States, the threat is American support for Israel, generating blowback terrorism against the American people in the first place. But what's really happening here with the demonizing Muslims and trying to make Americans afraid of Muslim and Islamist terrorism and whatever, and Sharia law and whatever, these kinds of propaganda campaigns in the United States is, as you said, to give license. So American public opinion overall, public support, gives license to Israel to kill any and all of their enemies because they all look Muslim to me, kind of thing, like we we're just saying.
The same people that
they need to steal the West Bank and the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, the same folks like Paul Singer that funded the Israeli lobby, funded the Open Borders lobby. And, it's our regime change wars that got us a lot of this migration. I was in Pietrasanta, Italy 2 years ago, and it was to my heartbreak that I saw a Syrian young man begging on this beautiful coastal town in Italy. Did this young Syrian man want to be in an alien civilization alone with no prospects of marriage or family life, begging? Of course not. But our wonderful regime change wars caused all of this. If we wouldn't have seen all of this immigration if not for all of our war follies. And I was just reading Hilar. This might seem like a strange comparison, but I had just reread Hilar Belloc's book, The Jews. And in it, he wrote it in like 33, 34, and he was responding to the Nazi party already at that time. And he said how the Nazis—
Who's the guy you're talking about? The author?
Hilar Belloc. He was G.K. Chesterton's best friend. So they used to call him the Chester Belloc monster. He was a really interesting character. He was he was French and English, a very charming writer. The Path to Rome, everyone should read. And but he wrote this book on the Jews, and it's Chesterton had said something in the mid 30s. Hilar and I started the decade out as the last anti-Semites in Europe, and we become the last defenders of the Jews in the world. But Hilar wrote in this book, The Jews, that the Nazis say they're going to save Western civilization from the Bolsheviks and Jews and then he listed all of the, just not allowing them to practice certain professions, taking their property, this and that. And Belloc said, you cannot break the social contract. You cannot make promises and commitments to people and then and then be unjust and say you're saving Western civilization. The Nazis are undermining Western civilization. And Bellick wrote this, like, I think it was 33, 34. And I would say the same for those on the right who think that, when they speak so cruel or harsh about our Muslim neighbors, it's like, look, I agree. For example, I've supported SIVs and safe houses and evacuated American allies, the special immigrant visa holders who were promised visas in exchange for fighting alongside American forces and serving as translators and putting their lives and their families' lives in jeopardy. We made them a deal, which was to give them a visa. Personally, I didn't like the SIV program. I think, as a recruitment tool to your cruise line, saying if the cruise ship sinks, you have a place on the lifeboat. I would have wanted everyone working alongside U.S. Armed Forces to have skin in the game in Afghanistan's success. And I didn't think it's prudent to bring in all these migrants from Afghanistan. And then yet people will say, well, but Jason, you have brought, you've served the Afghan SIV community. Some of my best friends have become, were Afghan SIVs that I've worked with now since the fall of Afghanistan. And I tell them to their face, yeah, I would not have approved this program. And they agree with me. But the point is, we made promises, we made commitments, we welcomed people in, we gave them citizenship. Now you just can't wake up and decide to abuse these people and to foment bigotry, especially when it's so clear what the aim of this is. And the aim of this is to excuse the genocide and ethnic cleansing in Gaza and to prepare the American people for the truth. Because when the whole truth comes out of Gaza, it's going to be unimaginable for people. People are not going to be able to comprehend the latest reports that they had infants and toddlers that were tied up and murdered that they found in mass graves in Gaza. These are the types of things people are going to have a very hard time processing. And when the real numbers of casualties come out of Gaza, like, I don't have a single Palestinian friend from Gaza that has not lost multiple relatives. And my friends are Christians mostly. So when the truth comes out, the world's going to be shocked. And so they're preparing us for this by fomenting bigotry. And as a Christian, and this is where I'm grateful that I'm a Catholic, is that the Catholic understanding of the human person made in the image and likeness of God, and the idea that everyone is my brother and sister, that I have no enemies, and that those who make me their enemy, I'm to love. I'm grateful that this is my faith. And again, we shouldn't be naive to Islamist threats. They're very real. We've helped fund and foment a lot of these threats, our very own threats. So we should, first of all, stop funding terrorist organizations, as we have been doing relentlessly now for decades, and be serious to protecting ethnic and religious minorities around the world.
What's this about the Israelis holding up your organization's aid into Gaza?
Yeah, it's first of all, I've never been allowed into Gaza, and I've requested many times. We have been more successful than other organizations in getting aid in, and I think it's partly because we are so small. This July, though, you may remember we spent 9 months working at getting 5,000 canisters of baby formula moved into Gaza. It took us 9 months, something that was very important to me to do. And within hours of the baby formula being delivered, and Israel knew who we were, they inspected the truck, and the truck went to exactly where it was supposed to go. And then hours later, an airstrike hit the warehouse, killing 2 contractors that worked for us. Then when NPR reached out to Israel for comment, the spokesperson said, "We know of the organization Vulnerable People Project very well, but we weren't aware that we're not aware if we struck one of their warehouses or not." So it's very hard.
It's like cold-blooded murder and then lying.
Yeah. It's cold-blooded murder. It could be lavender in these different AI programs that they're using.
Yeah, it's not cold-blooded murder. If the bot decided who to kill, then no one's responsible.
Well, Peter Thiel is responsible. This is when you look at all of the journalists that are being killed, we have one of 2 options, right? And all the aid workers that are being killed. Either it's Israeli commanders are just ruthless, cold-blooded murderers saying, kill this journalist as she breastfeeds her baby because she's reporting on all of the infant mortality in Gaza, which is something that happened. A journalist, as she was breastfeeding her baby, a drone lowered itself and boom, targeted her apartment, her window, and killed her. Either that was a human being that made that decision, which I do not want to believe. I think it was Lavender, because what Lavender does is it gives everyone in Gaza a credit score, a social credit score, sucks up everything it knows about you. And so commanders can go into an area and looking at targets based upon their score. And there's something called Where's Daddy? And that's something that tracks these people with these scores. And they usually target them when they get home, because when they go home, not only do you kill the person with the score, you kill their entire family.
Yeah. There's a new report about how they killed 700 family members of journalists too. Wait till a reporter leaves the house and then kill his wife and babies. That's what you get for telling the truth about us. And then they kill him, later that day. But let him suffer knowing that the trouble that he got his family in. Ha ha ha. First.
And to think that there are people in our country that their support for the state of Israel is based on their Christian faith. It's utterly absurd. The heresy
of most criminal regime. Well, you're a world traveler. Are there any other regimes in the world whose criminality compare to Israel? Surely not the Chicoms. They had to make up a bunch of crap about how they had murdered 300,000 Uyghurs and all of this stuff in order to try to have something to compare to.
Yeah, I think the only ones you could compare it to is China. Sadly, India is doing its best to catch up, and they're learning. India is learning that they can foment Hindu nationalist violence against Christians and Muslims in India, so long as they spread money around the conservative movement in the United States, they'll be silent. And so the same way we've seen the right silent on the ethnic cleansing and brutalization of Christians in the Holy Land, we are beginning to see a muzzle placed on conservatives on India. So I think it's very important that we also highlight.
And there's the article by Andrew Coburn about how there was an effort to outlaw discrimination against people based on their caste in California. And the tech companies lobbied hard as hell and killed it after Newsom had said he would sign it. And so this is a thing where you would think somehow, I don't know, you might daydream that caste is left behind when Indians move to the United States, but nope. They're rigidly enforcing their class system, their Hindu, ancient class system in the United States of America, where everybody's supposedly equal before the law and equal in their rights and dignity.
When all these tech Brahmins lost their mind over visas for Indians, I wrote a Substack saying that we shouldn't change at all how many Indians we bring in the United States. They should just come from the lower castes, none from the Brahmin caste, and just give them all to Christians, other minorities, and the Dalit. And yeah, obviously that's something that would not make the tech Brahmins happy.
No, right.
This is about the wealthy in India exploiting our system and not giving opportunities to the poor, to the Christians, to the others. And I don't know if
how are you supposed to assimilate third world people into this society when Americans don't believe in Americanism at all anymore? Have never even read the Declaration of Independence, have no idea what the Bill of Rights says or what any of even the premises of any of these arguments even mean. So, like the Simpsons, remember the Simpsons episode where they make Apu take the citizenship test and they put him through the ringer. He has to know, he knows the whole explanation for the Civil War and all this stuff, I don't even think they do that anymore because the government themselves, the people who run the government themselves, they don't know anything about it or care anything about it either.
No, I mean, I got my bachelor's degree in political science from an American university and we never once discussed our system. Yeah, no, it's quite sorrowful. It's quite sorrowful. But I think it is very important that we highlight how our own allies are at the forefront of persecuting Christians around the world, because they're using the persecution of Christians in places like Nigeria, which it's a big country. It's like a huge country. It's not Afghanistan. It's not Iraq. It is a huge country. It's very complex. And so you want to, and not that I I don't want to see the Islamists dealt with in Nigeria. I do. I lost an employee this year protecting 3 seminarians from an attack. And he died. A young man died with a wife and children. So I understand that there's a very real threat of Islamists in Nigeria, but it just seems like the first place that we could start is demanding that our allies ensure the protection of Christians. And surely our greatest ally, Israel, it'd be very easy for Netanyahu to stop the new settlements that are being built outside of Bethsahor and Bethlehem and Tebeh, choking the very life of the oldest Christian community. And Scott, this is what I'm saying. This Hasbara campaign of Netanyahu coming out and claiming to be the great guardian of Christians, it's a farce. And if we stop this, and if we use this to platform and tell the truth of what's happening in Bethsahor, what's happening in Tebeh, I think it's checkmate. We cannot let this tactic succeed. And I'm seeing people like Dinesh D'Souza and others tweeting out, how fortunate we are now to have the Mossad in Israel protecting Christians. Okay. We're so lucky. Why doesn't Azerbaijan give Artsakh back to the Armenians? Why don't we roll back that ethnic cleansing?
Yeah, boy, that ship has sailed now. Man, if you have any money, you should be buying gold with it. Central banks are hoarding it up. And if you need some, you should go to rrbi.co. That's Roberts and Roberts Brokerage Inc. It's my buddy Tim Fry. He's a really great guy. Him and this business, they've been over there for a very, very long time. And they will help you get your metals, and they will always do you right. That's Roberts and Roberts Brokerage Inc. at rrbi.co. I'll tell you what, everybody, libertarian and conservative podcasters out there listening to this too, if you want to get in contact with Jason Jones and get a real firsthand account of what things are like over there along these same lines, get in contact with me and I'll put y'all in touch. Before we go here, can you talk a little bit about the pogroms on the West Bank? It seems like there's been a lot of violence there lately. Some kook on Twitter said, yeah, but there's such a thing as Hamas in the West Bank. Somewhere there are some guys, I don't know, and then he linked to something at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. So anyway, obviously Hamas has no, authority there. I don't know if they have any presence at all, but this was invoked as a cheap excuse for all the land rustling that's been going on there lately. But it's been at a real increased tempo over the last couple of years there on the West Bank. Obviously not quite as bad as the bombing campaign in the Gaza Strip, but am I wrong that the Israelis don't even really care about Gaza so much? Jared Kushner wants his little beachfront property and some of the settlers, but it's really all about the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. God says we can kill you and take all of this, and that our job ain't done until we do. That whole West Bank and maybe the East one too, huh?
Yeah, and the settlers actually are more repulsed by the Christians than the Muslims, because they see the Muslims as monotheistic, but Christians, they believe, defile the land because we believe in homoousios, one God, 3 persons, and therefore we defile the land. So these radical settlers specifically hate and target and want to ethnically cleanse Christians, and that's why it's not a coincidence that the new settlements outside of Bethsahor that have just been approved, the violent assaults on the only Christian village left in the West Bank, Tebeh, they're not being attacked by teenagers. 75, Netanyahu said he's discovered it's about 75 teenagers that are responsible for all the settler violence. That's interesting. Then why can't they stop it? If it's just 75 kids, it seems like it should be very simple to stop. But I think they've backed themselves into a corner, because we can really highlight the role Israel has played in destabilizing the Middle East, exposing Christians to ethnic cleansing and genocide, or ecclesiocide as it's properly called, on the cleansing of an ecclesial community from where they've lived for 2,000 years. The Christians, actually the Palestinians descend from the people that were there at the time of Jesus. Then there were different invasions, of course, but they are genetically linked to the land, as are, of course, the Samaritans, and as, of course, are half the Jews that live in Israel, are genetically linked to the land. Unfortunately, the Jewish communities were the first to be ethnically cleansed by Zionism, because it's really European cultural supremacy. And so the Jews from Iran, from Iraq, from Ethiopia, from Yemen, their culture is quickly eviscerated and homogenized into the broader culture of Israel. So the first victims of Zionist ethnic cleansing were Jewish, the beautiful, diverse Jewish community.
Well, maybe the second.
Yeah, but I think by its very, the ideology's victim is, the first victim of the ideology is the person that holds it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And I see the settlers actually as victims of an ideology. When you go there, you're charmed by everyone, and you're just like the human condition. The older I get, what is it? Pat Buchanan said the older he gets, the wiser Russell Kirk becomes. And I feel the older I get, the wiser Hannah Arendt becomes. And I'm grateful for having read her.
I would say that about Pat myself. Yeah.
Yeah, and Pat Buchanan was right about everything.
Yeah.
But you go there, and I find the Jewish communities charming, and my heart is broken that they're addled by such a vicious ideology. My heart is broken that the Palestinians are victimized through the Zionists by this brutal ideology. And then what's worse is now in the United States, people that I'm very close to, some very prominent people in the media that are my friends, I've just watched as they have succumbed. They had to make a decision in the midst of this genocide, and they sided with wealth and power, prestige, and security, which they believe was continuing to advocate for Israel in the midst of this genocide. But it's those under 30, like as you said, Scott, they're not going to unsee what has happened. In fact, the young man who works for me today, I'm working on an article responding to Netanyahu's tweets. And he said, Jason, I think we're going to have to do another article responding to anti-Semitism after this, because that's all that's going to come from this is the rhetoric from the Zionists and Christian Zionists is fomenting Jew hatred in the youth, not just the United States, but around the world.
Yeah, well, that's all a positive side effect from Benjamin Netanyahu's point of view. And anti-Semitism has always been, that double-edged sword has always served Israel too, because they have a demographic problem worse than ever before now. They need Jews around the world to feel afraid, so they'll go to Israel, even though Israel is the cause of the destabilization that threatens them.
And I heard, the greatest, most articulate spokespersons against this genocide are Jewish. And I recently heard a Jewish commentator say, where is the most dangerous place in the world to be Jewish? Where?
Just
Israel.
Outside the Gaza fence. Yeah.
Israel. Israel is the most dangerous place in the world to be Jewish. This calumny that to be Jewish in Paris or New York or Chicago is in some way dangerous, it's absurd. In fact, 2 years ago, while evacuating Palestinians from Gaza into Egypt, we were taking them into hospitals, wounded women and children. And then I was interviewing them, and you could see the interviews at my website, vulnerablepeopleproject.com. As I was interviewing them, I was working on trying to write an article assessing my own anti-Semitism, to just confess it. But I really was finding trouble finding anything to confess. But it was as I was evacuating the Palestinians that I realized that even though here I am serving the Palestinian community, that I still held to a lot of prejudices against the Palestinian community, that they weren't well educated, that they were militant. I'm ashamed to say I believed a lot of this. And as I was evacuating them and interviewing Muslim women whose husbands were proud to tell me about how they worked hard so their wife could get their PhD, or just to see the love in between these families and the care and the worry. One young Christian woman who's the IDF came in, smashed her statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary, smashed her crucifix, and put on her underwear, danced around, and put it on YouTube, on social media. And you can see it in the video. We have these IDF soldiers dancing around in her underwear. We were able to get off social media. She expressed concern for them. And she had said here her family was wounded. She barely got out of Gaza alive, just in time to deliver birth to her child. And here she was saying, these young reservists are so poorly trained and so propagandized that my heart breaks to know how they're going to feel in 10 or 15 years when they're alone in an apartment in Tel Aviv. And I just thought, wow, I can't imagine that I would have such a humane and thoughtful response if I suffered or my family suffered in that way. And so I wrote an article called Help. I'm an anti-Palestinian bigot. And I just articulated all the ways in which I can assess that in my lifetime, I have been inculcated with prejudice towards Palestinians. And then we all have to acknowledge that. What we have witnessed this community suffer is really, really unbelievable. And I'm proud to say young people have it right. And to see like the boomer class criticize these young people for being horrified by this genocide is, you'll see them say blatantly, these young people are being propagandized by seeing Van Jones said, by seeing dead babies all day. Well, because you can watch dead babies all day. Well, maybe let's not make dead babies.
A wall of carnage is what the Obama speechwriter lady was saying. Like, how am I supposed to get through this wall of carnage? Yeah, well, you should have thought of that before you killed all those people. I don't know why. This is purely a Hasbara problem to them. Right. This is like which radio and TV stations and social media platforms do we have to purchase to make this problem go away? Yep. Well, not going to work. Way too.
Well, and look, and they're lying to us. They're gaslighting us. And I'm sad to say I'm going to write a really tough piece on Mike Huckabee, someone I've known for many years, 2 decades. But there were people that were with him when he was visiting Gaza, and he came back with Witkoff and said that he saw no signs of famine. There were people on that trip that shared with me clearly that he saw with his own eyes famine, and he's a liar. And so to know that our ambassador, he's really not our ambassador. He's Israel's ambassador to the United States.
Yeah.
So they should pay his salary. I mean, I'm sure they have probably paid him.
Still come out of our ass anyway,
Yeah, you're right. It's one way or the other. Scott, can I share something with your audience?
Absolutely.
So if you go to our website, vulnerablepeopleproject.com, we have a donor that for the end of the year giving gave us a matching grant. We quite didn't match it, and he gave us another month. But at vulnerablepeopleproject.com, we provided, I'm proud to say, every Christian family in Gaza has received a pop-up home through VPP in December. And we've distributed about 100 to orphan communities. They're pretty big. But now we're trying to flood Gaza with firewood. It's very cold. You've seen the video. Yeah. And so if you go to vulnerablepeopleproject.com and you want to do something, help us keep people alive. They're dying of hypothermia. It's brutal. I'm glad I was just there. In fact, when I shot the War Room episode for Bannon, we were on top of this roof on Christmas Eve, and it was freezing cold, and my face was, ice cold, and my hands, I couldn't. And I was thanking God. I'm like, this is going to really motivate me to raise money for firewood. Like, remember how horrible this feels right now.
Yeah. And look, everybody, the headlines on antiwar.com every day, including today, feature children freezing to death or dying from the elements one way or the other. Last night, it was a damaged building collapsed on a tent and killed a 5-year-old girl. And this is the worst hellscape on earth. And they just banned Doctors Without Borders and saved the children. What does that tell you?
No. And I'm sure I'll be banned. When we were leaving the country, they separated my team and questioned us all. And I don't suspect I'll ever be allowed back again, but, we'll do our best. We have an our organization is still operating in both the West Bank and Gaza. Whether I'll ever be allowed back again or not, we'll see.
All right. Happy New Year, Jason. Thank you for doing this.
No, thanks for having me on.
All right, you guys. Jason Jones directs the Vulnerable People Project. And that's the URL as well, vulnerablepeopleproject.com. And check out his show as well on Substack. That is the Jason Jones Show.substack.com. The Scott Horton Show is brought to you by the Scott Horton Academy of Foreign Policy and Freedom, Roberts & Roberts Brokerage, Inc., Moondo's Artisan Coffee, Tom Wood's Liberty Classroom, and APS Radio News. Subscribe in all the usual places and check out my books, Fool's Errand, Enough Already, and my latest, Provoked, How Washington Started the New Cold War with Russia and the Catastrophe in Ukraine. Find all of the above at scotthorton.org, and I'm serializing the audiobook of Provoked at scotthortonshow.com and patreon.com/Scott Horton Show. Bumpers by Josh Langford Music, intro and outro videos by Dissident Media, audio mastering by Podsworth Media. See y'all next time.